Ibrahim Traoré arrived at the television studio just before sunrise, his dark suit crisp and his expression calm. As he stepped out of the black SUV, the bright lights of the set glowed through the glass doors. Cameras, boom mics, and a small crowd of production staff hustled in the early morning air. Despite the bustle, Ibrahim moved with quiet confidence. He greeted each member of the crew with a nod and a gentle smile, acknowledging their work without a word wasted. Inside, the studio held a soft hum of activity. Makeup artists touched up the host's hair and face. Sound technicians tested microphones. Stagehands adjusted chairs and cue cards. A television monitor mounted above the control room door displayed the network's logo in bold letters. Ibrahim entered the green room, where a few bottles of water and coffee sat on a small table next to a plate of plain biscuits. He chose a bottle of water and sat on a leather couch, closing his eyes for a moment. He took a slow, deep breath, feeling the weight of expectations settle in his chest. This was not the first time Ibrahim had appeared on live television, yet today felt different. The topic promised to be sensitive, the progress and the setbacks in his country's young government. He rehearsed in his mind the facts he wanted to share: statistics on new schooling programs, data on improved road construction, stories of families who had benefited. Still, he knew that facts alone would not carry the conversation. His people were watching, and the world was listening. He needed honesty, not only prepared lines. A stagehand peeked into the green room and signaled that it was time. Ibrahim rose, smoothed his jacket, and followed the assistant through the hallway. They passed a wall of framed photographs, past guests who had sat on this very set. Politicians, artists, athletes, thinkers. Each image told a story of its own. Ibrahim felt a sense of history in that corridor. He stepped onto the stage floor, where lights hovered overhead like silent guardians. At the center of the set, a long desk faced the audience seats. Whoopi Goldberg sat at one end of the desk, dressed in a simple blouse and a warm scarf. Her hair was neatly styled, and she looked up with a welcoming nod. On the other side of the desk sat two other panelists, a respected journalist and a well-known economist. Behind them, the audience was still being seated. A few dozen people murmured softly, turning their heads as Ibrahim took his place next to Whoopi. The director counted down. "Stand by in 5, 4, 3. Ibrahim straightened his posture. He placed his hands lightly on the desk, steady and open. At 2, 1, and we're live. A bright red light blinked on a small sign near the desk. The studio lights brightened. Ibrahim heard the faint click of viewers in their homes, pressing record on their DVRs. A comfortable smile crossed his face. He greeted the audience and the host with a calm voice. "Good morning, and thank you for having me." Whoopi returned his greeting with her signature warmth. "Minister Traoré, welcome to our program. You have been making headlines around the world, and we want to find out why. Let's start with the basics. How do you see the state of your nation today?" Ibrahim paused, choosing his words carefully. He spoke of a country with many challenges, a history of poverty in rural areas, tensions between different communities, limited resources. Yet he balanced the picture with the progress underway. New schools were being built, roads repaired, water systems installed. He shared a short anecdote about a teacher in a remote village who taught under a tree for lack of a building, and how, thanks to recent funding, children now had a proper classroom. The audience listened respectfully. Whoopi nodded, encouraging him to continue. After a few minutes of this measured conversation, Whoopi leaned forward. Her eyes moved from Ibrahim to the audience, drawing in their attention. Then she asked the question that had already become the talk of social media. "Minister Traoré, if things have improved under your leadership, why is it that so many people still go to bed hungry? Why do so many villages lack electricity and health care? Aren't these the same problems that plagued your predecessors? Why should the world believe that your administration is different?" The question landed in the air like a challenge. For a moment, the lights seemed brighter and the studio quieter. Ibrahim looked at Whoopi. He could feel the attention of the other panelists and the silent studio audience pressing on him. A bead of sweat formed at his hairline, but he did not flinch. He inhaled slowly. He began by acknowledging the frustration behind her words. Ms. Goldberg. I understand the pain that hunger and lack of basic services cause. I feel it too. I grew up in a small town where water had to be carried long distances. I saw families struggle to pay for medicine. I understand that for many. The changes we are making are not happening fast enough. Hess' tone was steady, but honest. He paused, letting his admission sink in, then spoke of the realities of governance. Limited budgets, competing priorities, and the need to build institutions that could last beyond one term. He described the anti-corruption measures his government had introduced, including audits of every ministry and new protections for whistleblowers. He spoke of international partnerships that had brought in funding for hospitals and electrification projects. Then he shared a concrete example. In the town of Cumbri, in the northeast region, there had been no electricity at all until 6 months ago. With funding from an international development agency and the careful oversight of local engineers, power lines were extended to the town's clinic and school. Now, children could study after dark, and patients could receive treatment with modern equipment. He told the story of a young girl named Awa, whose family could now refrigerate her insulin, saving her life. A collective hush fell over the studio as people pictured the young girl in that small town. Ibrahim continued, explaining that these projects took time planning, procurement, training, local staff. He admitted that more needed to be done and that many regions were still waiting for support. Yet he emphasized that the trajectory was upward. He spoke of the national budget now earmarked for health and education at higher levels than ever before. He spoke of community councils that had been empowered to decide which projects were most urgent in their areas. As he concluded, Ibrahim looked directly at Whoopi. Change does not happen overnight, he said. And it cannot happen without honesty about our failures and clarity about our goals. I believe in this country. I believe in its people. But I know we must work together, government, citizens, and international friends, to build the future we all want. For a moment, no one spoke. The panelists exchanged glances. Whoopi's. The usual spark of conversation seemed paused by the weight of his words. The audience sat silent, as though holding its breath. Then, gradually, the cameras pivoted back to Whoopi, and she gave him a slow, respectful nod. Ibrahim felt the tension. Ease as the director signaled to proceed. The conversation shifted to more technical questions, but the atmosphere had changed. Ibrahim had spoken with humility and purpose, and the studio had listened. When the segment ended, Ibrahim was thanked and escorted off the set. He walked back through the corridor of framed photos, each one a reminder of voices heard on this stage. In the green room, the crew applauded quietly as he removed his lapel microphone. He offered a short, genuine smile, grateful for the chance to speak directly to the people watching. As he left the building, the sun had fully risen, promising a new day and a new chapter for his nation. The lights had barely dimmed when Ibrahim Traoré stepped off the stage, but in his mind the questions still glowed bright. Back in the green room, he sank into the same leather couch where he had paused before walking out. The applause from the crew felt warm, but he knew the real test lay beyond these walls. He closed his eyes for a moment and let himself breathe. He felt tired, yet energized by the honesty he had shared. A young aide entered, carrying a folder of reaction notes from the control room. As she handed it to him, she whispered, "Social media is buzzing. People are calling your words genuine." Ibrahim nodded and looked through the pages. Tweets and posts flooded with comments, some praising his humility, others demanding faster progress. He read a note from the producer. "We'll give you time to review these before your next segment." He folded the paper and set it aside. He would look later. An assistant tapped on the door. "Your car is ready, sir," she said quietly. Ibrahim stood and smoothed his jacket. He felt the slight ache in his back from sitting on that hard studio stool for long minutes. He thanked everyone and walked down the corridor toward the exit. His steps were steady. He greeted a makeup artist and a floor manager with a nod. No one knew his thoughts, but he hoped his calm carried the right message. Outside, the sky was a pale blue, and the morning sun cast long shadows on the pavement. His black SUV waited with the engine softly humming. The driver opened the rear door and Ibrahim settled onto the leather seat. As the door closed, the glass shielded him from the outside world. He leaned back and closed his eyes again, letting the motion of the car carry him away from the noise of the cameras and mics. He thought about the moment when the studio had gone silent after his answer. He recalled Whoopi's expression, first surprise, then respect. He imagined the audience in their homes leaning forward, waiting for someone to speak. He felt the weight of their expectations. People who wanted change. People who had lost faith, and people who still believed in progress. He knew his words could inspire hope, but he also knew they could raise frustration if he failed to deliver results. The SUV drove through busy streets, lined with tall buildings. Men and women hurried along the sidewalks, carrying briefcases or pushing strollers. Traffic lights changed color as cars and buses stopped and started. Ibrahim watched through the tinted glass, seeing fragments of everyday life. A street vendor sold fresh fruit from a cart. A group of students in uniforms laughed as they walked toward their school. He remembered the classrooms he had visited last month, where children sat on simple wooden benches, eager to learn under a leaky roof. He wanted to build real schools for them. He wanted to bring water to their taps. The driver turned into a quieter neighborhood. A small sign marked the entrance to the press center. Ibrahim's next appointment was a press conference with journalists. From home and abroad. He straightened his tie as the SUV slowed. Moments later, he walked up the steps and entered a glass-fronted building. Inside, rows of chairs faced a podium and a table covered in microphones. Reporters set up cameras and adjusted lenses. A banner behind the podium read the name of his office. He approached the podium with a calm smile. Reporters greeted him with nods and whispers. Some held notepads, others held recorders. He placed his notes on the stand and looked out at the room. The silence was purposeful. He waited until everyone settled and then spoke in a clear voice. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I welcome your questions about my appearance on the television program and about the work we are doing to improve our country." His tone was steady, respectful. He answered questions about the anti-corruption measures in more detail, how ministry budgets were now public, how local councils could audit projects, and how complaints from citizens were tracked through a new online system. He explained that international partners had committed funds for solar panels in off-grid villages, and that training programs would teach local technicians to install and maintain them. A journalist asked about the slow pace of electrification. Ibrahim admitted that while some regions had modern power lines, others still waited. He said that his government had launched a fast-track plan to bring solar microgrids to remote areas, and that the first of these would be operational within 3 months. He gave the example of 2 villages in the north, where residents had formed committees to oversee the installation and to manage payments. The microgrids would light homes, power clinics, and keep refrigerators running for vaccines. The room was silent for a moment before the next question. Ibrahim welcomed each inquiry, never dismissing criticism, always offering concrete steps forward. After the press conference, he exited into a small foyer. His chief of staff was waiting, with a calendar and a stack of briefing papers. They spoke in low voices about upcoming meetings with development banks and with community leaders. Ibrahim listened and asked questions. He wanted to understand where bottlenecks had formed. Was funding delayed? Were there staff shortages? Did local officials need more training? He learned that a delay in road repairs in the south was due to missing documents from the central ministry. He made a note to call the minister in charge and resolve the issue. By the end of the day, back in his SUV, the driver took him to the presidential office. On the way, Ibrahim reviewed his notes. He thought about the balance he had to strike. Show progress without overstating it. Admit failures without undermining confidence. He thought of a WA, the girl whose insulin needed refrigeration. He thought of the teacher under the tree and the students now learning in a proper classroom. He thought of his own childhood when he walked miles to fetch water. He knew his decisions affected millions of people. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also the clarity of purpose. At the office, he met with his economic advisor. They sat across a large wooden desk, maps and graphs spread between them. The advisor presented data on budget allocations and spending. They discussed how to speed up audit processes and how to allocate emergency funds to the most urgent infrastructure needs. Ibrahim asked for progress reports from each region and insisted on weekly updates. He also asked the advisor to propose a public dashboard where citizens could see which projects were active in their area, how much money was allocated, and who was responsible for oversight. Later, he met with a group of community representatives, village chiefs, women's group leaders, and youth activists. They had traveled from different parts of the country to share their concerns. In a roundtable discussion, each spoke briefly. A chief from the east asked for help repairing a bridge washed away by last year's rains. A leader from the capital's outskirts asked for more support for job training programs. Youth activists asked for better internet access in rural schools. Ibrahim listened carefully, taking notes. He thanked each person for their honesty and explained which departments would follow up. He promised to visit the east to inspect the bridge repairs personally in the coming weeks. As the afternoon light waned, Ibrahim returned to his private office. He sat at his desk, removed his jacket, and leaned back. His phone buzzed with messages, of praise and criticism alike. He chose a few messages to read. A message from a teacher in a small town saying, "Thank you for hearing our story." Another message from a mother thanking him for the microgrid plans. Then a message from an opposition leader demanding faster action. He acknowledged each mentally and prepared to address them in turn. He opened his laptop and drafted a short public statement. "Today, I spoke honestly about our challenges and our work. We must continue to be open about what we can do and what we still need to achieve. I am committed to transparency and to serving every region of our country." Scheduled it to post on his official social channels that evening. He hoped the message would reach those who needed reassurance and spur conversation about real solutions. Before leaving the office, he reviewed tomorrow's schedule. A site visit to a new school building, a meeting with foreign donors, and a town hall livestream. He prepared his talking points, ensuring he had local data and personal stories to share. He wanted each event to be as honest and engaging as his television appearance. As he stepped into the car to head home, Ibrahim allowed himself a small moment of calm. The day had been long, but the steps he and his team were taking felt right. The studio silence had given way to action plans, meetings, site visits. He thought of the people counting on him. He thought of Ah sleeping peacefully with her insulin safe on ice. He thought of classrooms filled with children's laughter under sturdy roofs. He felt renewed determination. He knew the journey was far from over, but today had been a step forward, and he would keep moving ahead. Ibrahim awoke on the third morning with a mix of anticipation and resolve. He had spent the past 2 days out in the field, hearing directly from teachers, mothers, and farmers. Today he would return to the studio not for another interview, but to host a live town hall broadcast where citizens could call in with questions. As he dressed, he thought about how different this environment would feel, from dusty roads and half-built school walls to bright lights and a national audience. He knew that honesty had carried him so far, and he resolved to keep that openness alive. When he arrived at the television studio, the crew welcomed him like an old friend. The set was arranged in a semicircle of chairs, each facing toward a central camera. To his left sat a moderator, and to his right sat a small panel of experts, an educator, a health official, and an engineer. Ibrahim took his place at the center, feeling the energy of anticipation in the air. He glanced at the large screen behind him, which would soon display callers' names and faces. He held his notes loosely, reminding himself to speak from the heart. The red on-air light blinked on, and Ibrahim greeted the audience with warmth. "Good evening, my fellow citizens," he began. "Last week I visited many villages and I heard your stories. Tonight I want to hear more from you directly." Immediately, calls flooded in. The first came from a school teacher in the north who asked whether more classrooms would be built next year. Ibrahim listened carefully and acknowledged that the teacher's district had received only one new building so far. He explained that he was working with the education ministry to include that district in next year's budget and promised to visit again to see progress. The next call came from a young father whose community lay beyond the solar microgrid pilot. He asked when his family could expect reliable electricity. Ibrahim smiled and said that the success of the first microgrid in Cumbria would lead to expansion. He told the caller that his village was on the list for the next phase, scheduled to begin in 3 months, and that engineers would meet with local leaders soon to plan details. The father sounded relieved, and Ibrahim felt satisfaction at knowing plans were unfolding beyond the capital offices. Midway through the broadcast, the moderator posed a tougher question. "Minister, some citizens still see slow progress on road repairs. They wonder if funds are being spent fairly or if deeper problems remain. What do you say to them?" Ibrahim took a steady breath. He said he understood the frustration. Roads were lifelines for business and for school buses alike. He described the audit system now in place, where every contract over a certain amount is publicly posted online. He added that he personally reviews reports each week and that any signs of misuse are referred immediately to an independent commission. He spoke plainly, without apology or excuses, and called for citizen vigilance alongside government oversight. A caller from the border region asked about medical care for expectant mothers. He told the story of a mother who walked 20 kilometers for prenatal checkups. Ibrahim's voice softened as he responded, said the Ministry of Health was deploying mobile clinics to reach remote communities and had hired additional midwives for training. He shared that by the end of the month, 2 mobile units would operate along the main routes, and that plans were underway to build small health posts in each subdistrict. He invited feedback on locations and schedules, emphasizing that citizens' input would shape the rollout. As the hour progressed, the questions grew more diverse. An entrepreneur asked how small businesses could apply for microloans. A student asked about scholarships for university study. A teacher asked for more books on science and math. Ibrahim treated each question with equal respect, giving concrete answers and admitting where further work was needed. When no immediate solution existed, he promised to convene experts and to follow up personally. He encouraged callers to use the online portal he had launched, where they could submit written proposals and track government responses. Near the end of the broadcast, the moderator invited Ibrahim to share a final message. He spoke directly and sincerely, "Tonight, I have heard your hopes and your concerns. I have shared our plans and the work we are doing. But plans alone do not build roads or classrooms. It takes partnership between government, community leaders, and each one of you. I ask you to stay involved. Check the data we post. Ask questions. Hold us accountable and share your ideas. Together, we can build a future where every child has a chance, where no mother fears for her life during childbirth, and where our villages shine with light and opportunity." A quiet applause followed, and the program ended with a simple thank you. After the broadcast, Ibrahim remained on set for a brief debrief. The moderator thanked him for his candor, and the panelists praised the interactive format. Producers told him the phone line stayed active for another hour with messages of thanks and further questions. Ibrahim nodded, feeling both relief and fatigue. He knew that this kind of direct dialogue was tiring but vital. It brought government closer to the people and built trust through transparency. He left the studio and returned to his office, where a pile of voicemail summaries awaited. He and his team sorted through suggestions and requests. They flagged urgent issues such as a village needing emergency water pump sand scheduled. Follow-up calls with relevant ministers. Ibrahim reviewed each item, adding his notes, and assigned tasks to deputies. He wanted every promise made on national television to translate into action on the ground. Late that evening, as he walked through the quiet corridors of his office, building, Ibrahim reflected on the day. He remembered the faces of callers, the teacher whose voice trembled with hope, the young father relieved by news of lights, the mother assured of better care. He thought of the tired engineer who would now train villagers in solar maintenance sooner than expected. He felt a deep sense of purpose in knowing that his role was not just policy or politics, but listening, learning, and responding. Before leaving for home, he paused by a map on the wall marked with colored pins representing project sites. He added new pins for the next solar phase and the mobile clinics. He highlighted districts slated for road repairs and added notes by hand. This map told the story of progress. Some areas already bright with pins, others waiting for attention. He traced his finger along the lines of dirt roads and rivers, imagining bridges and buses crossing them. He promised himself to follow up on each pin until every region had its share of development. At home, Ibrahim sat at his small dining table with a simple meal of rice and vegetables. He ate quietly, thinking of the long hours ahead. Tomorrow would bring another site visit, this time to a women's cooperative, making goods for Marketant. Then a meeting with foreign donors interested in supporting vocational training. He knew his days would be full, but he felt energized by the purpose behind each meeting. He sent a quick message to the chief of staff. Great town hall today. Let's review follow-up items first thing in the morning. Then he opened his laptop to read messages from citizens. One teacher had sent a photo of new textbooks arriving at the school in her village. A health worker shared plans for the first mobile clinic route. A local council member thanked him for the call-in show that let them speak up. Ibrahim smiled as he read each one and replied with a short note of thanks. As he prepared for bed, he reflected on the pattern emerging. In his work, speak honestly, listen quietly, act swiftly, then speak again. It was a cycle that demanded humility and energy, but it built a bridge between government and people. He felt that with each honest conversation, with each fulfilled promise, trust grew and obstacles fell away. He lay down, mind racing with schedules and site visits, yet heart calm with purpose. The journey continued, and he would keep moving forward, one honest answer at a time. Ibrahim woke before dawn the next morning, the first light barely touching the sky outside his window. He sat on the edge of his bed for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The past 2 days had been a whirlwind of studio interviews, press conferences, and meetings with advisors. Now he needed to step away from the paperwork and speak directly with the people whose lives his policies were meant to improve. He dressed quickly in a simple shirt and slacks, then joined his driver for the ride. To a small village where a new school was nearing completion. The road out of the city was still quiet, the pavement lit only by faint streetlights. As the SUV moved forward, Ibrahim reviewed the day's plan. First, he would tour the half-built classrooms, then meet with local teachers and parents to hear their concerns. After lunch, he would visit a nearby solar microgrid site, where engineers were installing panels to power the village's clinic. Finally, he would attend an open-air town hall meeting before returning home late in the evening. By mid-morning, the SUV left the paved highway and turned onto a dusty dirt road. Fields of golden millet stretched out on either side, dotted with thatched huts. Children ran alongside the car for a short distance, waving shyly before darting back to their chores. Ibrahim watched them through the tinted windows. Remembering his own childhood days spent running barefoot across similar fields, he felt a mix of nostalgia and resolve. He wanted today's children to have a future brighter than his own past. They arrived at the school site just as the sun climbed higher in the sky. A half-built structure of red brick and concrete stood in the center of a cleared plot. A group of workers paused their work to greet him. Ibrahim stepped out of the car and walked across the bare earth, greeting each person by name. He shook hands with the foreman, who explained that the project had faced delays because of funding gaps and supply shortages. Ibrahim listened carefully, nodding as he made mental notes. Inside the shell of what would be 2 classrooms, steel rods jutted from the columns, ready for more concrete. Piles of sand, bags of cement, and stacks of red bricks lined the coarse walls. The wind carried the scent of earth and dust. Ibrahim ran his hand across a rough brick wall and imagined the day when it would be painted in bright colors and children's. Drawings covered its surface. He knelt to inspect a window frame, noting that it was sturdy, but that glass panes were still weeks away. He asked the school's head teacher how many children would attend. She replied that the building would serve nearly 200 students once completed. They walked outside to meet a small group of parents waiting nearby. Mothers in colorful cloth wraps held babies on their hips, while fathers in work shirts shaded their eyes from the sun. One man, tall and lean, stepped forward. He introduced himself as Amadou and explained that his 3 children had been attending classes under a tree for the past 2 years. The makeshift classroom offered no shelter from rain or heat. When it rained, classes were canceled. When the sun was hot, children struggled to stay focused. Amadou's voice trembled as he described his hope that the new building would change everything. Ibrahim placed a calming hand on his shoulder and promised that the government would release the necessary funds within the week to finish the project. Next, they drove a few kilometers to the solar microgrid site. Engineers in blue overalls worked with cables and mounting racks. A row of solar panels already faced the sky at an angle, glinting in the sunlight. Ibrahim walked among the equipment, asking technical questions. How many kilowatts of power the system would generate? What battery storage was in place, and how? Local technicians would be trained to maintain the panels. An engineer named Fatou explained that the system would power the clinic's lights, medical equipment, and a small waiting area. It would also supply the school when it was completed. She added that the project was on schedule for activation in 3 weeks. Ibrahim knelt beside a battery bank and asked Fatou to show him how the controller regulated charging. She demonstrated the control panel's display and explained the safety procedures. Ibrahim listened intently, then asked whether the community had been informed about safety and maintenance. Fatou said that a series of workshops would begin next month, led by the Ministry of Energy. Ibrahim noted that the schedule was too late. He asked that the workshops be held before the system went live so that villagers could be ready from day one. Fatou agreed, grateful for his direct intervention. By early afternoon, Ibrahim returned to his SUV and headed toward the village square, where the town hall meeting would be held. A low platform under a canvas canopy had been set up near the market stalls. Villagers began to gather on simple wooden benches, some sitting on mats spread on the dusty ground. A small crowd formed around the edges, young men leaning on bicycles, vendors packing their goods for the evening market, and elders seated in folding chairs. Ibrahim climbed onto the platform and took the microphone. He looked out over the faces. In the crowd, faces lined with hope, concern, and curiosity. He began with a greeting in the local language, then switched to the official language of the nation, so everyone could understand. He spoke about the day's visits, the school under construction, the solar panels taking shape, and the promise of light and health for all. He asked for questions and comments, reminding everyone that this meeting was their chance to speak freely. Hands shot up. A young teacher asked whether new textbooks would arrive before the school opened. Ibrahim responded that the Ministry of Education had secured contracts for textbooks and that deliveries would start within 10 days. A mother asked whether the clinic would receive medicine for common illnesses. Ibrahim said that a recent shipment of vaccines and antibiotics was on its way and would arrive by the end of the week. When a farmer asked about irrigation for his crops, Ibrahim admitted that water infrastructure was not his direct portfolio, but promised to coordinate with the Ministry of Agriculture. He encouraged the farmer to organize a committee of interested locals to present specific proposals. He explained that citizen involvement was key to successful projects. A teenager asked whether his school would have internet access. Ibrahim paused and smiled. He said that after the solar panels were fully operational, government would install a small satellite receiver to provide basic internet, starting with educational websites and online libraries. The questions and answers continued for nearly an hour. Ibrahim never lost patience. He spoke plainly, avoiding political jargon. He thanked each person for their question and provided clear next steps. The villagers listened attentively, some nodding, others whispering among themselves. When the meeting ended, Ibrahim stepped down from the platform. People lined up to shake his hand, offer thanks, and share more requests. He moved slowly through the crowd, giving each person a moment, asking their name, and promising to follow. Up. A young girl handed him a drawing of the sun and a schoolhouse. Ibrahim accepted it with a smile and told her how much he looked forward to seeing her learn in the new building. As the sun dipped low in the sky, Ibrahim left the village square and returned to the SUV. He watched the villagers begin to pack up the benches and chairs, their voices carrying in the soft evening air. He felt the day's weight in his tired muscles, but also felt fulfilled. He thought of the children who would soon have a proper classroom, of the clinic that would stay lit through the night, and of the sense of community that grew when people could talk openly with their leaders. The drive back to the city was quiet. Ibrahim's mind replayed the day's highlights and challenges. He knew that tomorrow would bring new obstacles, funding hurdles, logistical delays, oversight reports, but he also knew that today's visit had made a real difference. He felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would return to his office the next morning to ensure that the promises he had made were kept. For now, he allowed himself a moment of reflection, thankful for the chance to walk among his people and hear their voices directly. The road to progress was long, but today he had moved closer to the destination. Ibrahim woke the next morning to the soft chime of his alarm and the distant crow of a rooster. He stretched and sat on the edge of his bed, thinking back on the day before. He had walked among children under a half-built school, watched engineers mount solar panels, and listened to villagers speak freely in the open-air town hall. Now he knew the real work lay ahead, turning promises into reality. After a quick shower, he donned his dark suit and paused by the window. The sun rose in, a golden haze warming the city streets below. Taxi drivers voiced greeting calls, shopkeepers rolled up metal shutters, and street vendors arranged piles of fresh produce. Ibrahim sipped his tea and felt the weight of his responsibilities settle on him once more. He would return to the capital's heart, the president's office, to report on the village visit and push for the funds and approval needed to follow through. As his driver guided the SUV through the early traffic, Ibrahim reviewed his notes on the day's achievements and next steps. He planned to ask for an accelerated release of school construction funds and an early shipment of medical supplies. For the clinic, he would propose that the Ministry of Energy launch the solar workshops before activation. He would recommend a pilot internet installation at one additional village. He also needed to secure a commitment for bridge repairs. In the eastern region, each proposal would require signatures, budget adjustments, and swift coordination among ministries. At the presidential office, Ibrahim stepped into a marble-floored hallway lined with portraits of past leaders. He felt the silent gaze of history encouraging him onward. His chief of staff greeted him and led him into a conference room where the president, cabinet members, and senior advisors waited. He set up his presentation, a simple slideshow with photographs from yesterday. Children studying under a tree. The brick walls of the new school, lines of solar panels shimmering in. The sun and the eager faces of villagers at the town hall. When Ibrahim began to speak, his voice was clear and direct. Showed the photograph of Awaz's family celebrating as engineers connected the first solar panel. He described how Awaz's insulin would stay cool, how the nurse in the clinic could use a light to treat patients after dusk, and how the community had come together to plan maintenance. He pointed to the sketch of the school building, explaining that funds for windows and doors must be released this week to keep construction on schedule. He highlighted the villagers' urgent request for textbooks and medicines, and he urged the cabinet to expedite contracts. The president listened with a thoughtful expression, occasionally nodding. The ministers whispered among themselves, flipping through reports. When Ibrahim finished, a moment of silence fell over the room. Then, the president spoke, his tone measured. "Minister Traoré, your report makes clear the urgency of these projects. You must act quickly. I will authorize the release of the school funds and instruct the Ministry of Finance to process the contracts immediately. As for the medical supplies, coordinate with the health minister to ensure delivery this month. Regarding the solar workshops, Energy Ministry, please adjust your schedule to begin training next week. And for the bridge repairs, you have my word that you will inspect the site with the Minister of Infrastructure tomorrow." A wave of relief washed over Ibrahim. He thanked the president and the ministers. They agreed on deadlines and a plan. For weekly progress reviews, as he left the conference room, Ibrahim felt a surge of hope. The promises he had made to the villagers were now official government commitments. Later that afternoon, he met with his communications team to plan how to share the news with the public. He wanted transparency, a clear statement of what had been promised, why it mattered, and when people could expect results. Together, they drafted a short video script featuring clips from the village visit and clear graphics showing timelines for each project. He insisted on simple language and personal stories, like OIS, insulin, and the children's textbooks so viewers could connect with the human impact. That evening, he recorded the video in his office. He spoke directly to the camera, looking into the lens as if speaking to each citizen. "Yesterday, I visited Cumbri and saw your faces, your hopes, and your challenges. Today, I secured the funding and approvals to build your school, deliver medicine, bring electricity, and repair roads. We will work together, and you will see these changes in the coming weeks. Thank you for your trust. We will not let you down." The short video ended with a graphic listing the key dates. Textbooks in 10 days. Solar workshops next week, school windows in 2 weeks, and bridge inspection tomorrow. Early the next morning, Ibrahim posted the video on his official social channels and sent it to news outlets. Within hours, reporters ran headlines praising the swift action. Social media messages flooded in. A teacher in the East wrote, "Thank you for caring about our broken bridge." And a mother in Cumbria posted a photo of her children studying under a lamp for the first time. Ibrahim read each message with gratitude, forwarding the most urgent concerns to his team. He felt the momentum building. When people saw progress, they believed again. Over the following days, Ibrahim oversaw each project's start. He visited the Ministry of Finance to confirm the release of school funds. He joined the health minister as they signed the contract for medical supplies. And he personally called the head engineer of the solar program to ensure the workshop schedule was updated. He made a surprise visit to the bridge site and walked across the damaged span, feeling the gap under his feet. He instructed the infrastructure minister to deploy emergency materials so that at least foot traffic could resume before the rains began. In the capital's press conference a week later, journalists asked about the progress of the village projects. Ibrahim showed photos of workers installing school windows and doors, of nurses unpacking medicine crates, and of engineers teaching villagers how to test solar panel output. He answered questions frankly, admitting that some deliveries had been delayed by customs paperwork, but announcing that he was personally overseeing the process to clear the backlog. He ended the session by inviting journalists to accompany him next month for a follow-up visit. Meanwhile, in Cumbria and other villages, life began to change. The school walls were plastered and painted in bright pastel colors. The windows let in cool air, and the doors stood strong against wind and rain. Children sat at wooden desks, holding new textbooks and reading aloud. In the clinic, lamps glowed at night as nurses monitored patients' vital signs. Villagers whispered of the day when they would no longer live in darkness after sunset. A group of local technicians proudly demonstrated how to check the battery bank's voltage using simple tools. Back at his office, Ibrahim read weekly progress reports. He noted the number of textbooks delivered, the percentage of window installations complete, and the attendance at the initial solar workshops. He saw that the bridge emergency repairs had restored foot traffic, allowing farmers to carry their goods to market again. He felt satisfaction at each milestone, yet he knew this was only the beginning. Sustainable progress would require continued oversight, community involvement, and honest communication. One evening, as he prepared notes for the month's cabinet meeting, Ibrahim paused to reflect. He thought of the studio silence that had followed his televised answer. In that moment, he had chosen honesty over rhetoric, humility over pride. That choice had set in motion a series of actions, from the president's office to the dusty roads of Cumbria, that brought real change. He realized that leadership was not just about words or policies, but about listening, learning, and following through. He picked up a framed photograph from his desk. Al was smiling as she held a lamp turned on by the microgrid. Her family gathered behind her. He smiled back at her. He placed the photo back and looked out the window at the city lights twinkling. In the dusk, he felt a deep sense of purpose and a renewed commitment to his nation's future. As the night deepened, Ibrahim closed his laptop and turned off the desk lamp. He walked to the window and gazed out at the skyline, where neighborhoods lay awake with promise and new beginnings. He whispered a silent vow to keep speaking honestly, acting decisively, and serving with humility. The journey ahead would be long, but with each honest answer and every fulfilled promise, he would help his people move toward a brighter tomorrow.